Alright, Final Fantasy X, possibly one of the more interesting games that I've ever played. Not to mention, it has a very nice new feel to it, and kind of putting you in this world that very much bridges the gap between technology and kind of magic that's traditionally been a common theme throughout. Anyway, I mean, Final Fantasy VII had it kind of. Final Fantasy VIII, not so much, but still there. Final Fantasy IX, yes, Mist and the airships and all those, yeah, the evil and heretical steam engines as opposed to Mist engines. But anyway, on to Final Fantasy X, where we have a distinction between, well, a more explicitly religious kind of thing, which is interesting to me. I've always found it fascinating that they actually decided to do this. That they actually took a religious system within the general world that we'll call Spira, and they took that and they had it become virulently opposed to what we call machines or technology. They call it machina, which I believe is just the Latin for machine, something to that extent. But it always fascinated me also to just play it multiple times to get into how the organization went, because there is a interesting hierarchy. We have acolytes way at the bottom who kind of maintain the temples, but then we have priests, but then we have I think we might even have high priests, but then there's the summoners and the high summoners. Although, yeah, there's a spoiler here. I will warn you and give you a couple of seconds while I ramble on and warn you about it being spoiler. But yeah, with the high summoner thing, it's interesting little irony, because there's only been one high summoner that actually actually is alive, and that would be Yuna, because she's the last summoner to even do that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, that's the idea. The high summoner is kind of like being a saint in the Catholic religion. You do a great little miracle, but you're dead. And the miracle, of course, is beating this big giant skeleton fish thing that they call Sin, which struck me even at an early age before I was really thinking, hey, I want to study religion. It just struck me, wow, they're actually calling this thing something so explicitly religious. I mean, sin? Although, if you go with the Japanese, it could translate as shin, which kind of would sound more like heart or mind, and you'd think, it would get another interpretation entirely out of you. But there's further things with the characters and their development in relation to this. We have Titus. He and Riku and Auron especially are all very much skeptical towards this whole Yevon religion thing. But then we have Waka on the very other extreme that, yeah, he believes this stuff very, very wholeheartedly, and he gets very, very angry when people piss him off about stuff like that. He really doesn't like Machina, mostly because of a little issue that happened with his brother, which I won't get into. But then we have Lulu, is kind of in between. I mean, she believes in this stuff and she wants to go along with it, but at the same time, there are conversations that seem to indicate that she has a little more of a divisive attitude towards it, or what's the word? A divided attitude, rather, because Waka's brother was actually her lover. I can say that much. It's no secret. They reveal relatively early, within probably about 6 hours of the game, that she is divided between her lover, that was Waka's brother, and Waka, who it's indicated somewhat she might have a romantic interest in. But it's interesting in that way, because it's indicated at least somewhat that Waka's brother was on the side of Machina, or machines, whereas Waka was not, and then Lulu's right in between that, and it makes her just, Not to mention Lulu is probably the biggest example of fan service in the whole game, although Riku is quite nearly equal to her anyway, I would imagine. But, of course, a lot of people don't like this game, particularly because of Titus, which I can imagine. I mean, the voice actor, or voice acting in general, makes him seem like a whiny bitch of some sort or another, as people generally characterize the character. That seems redundant to even use that phrase. Anyway, now we have Auron, probably one of the most liked characters in the whole game, if only because the guy has these really cool 70s sunglasses, and he's got a scar on one of his eyes, and he's voiced by, I'm guessing, it seems like it's Stephen J. Bloom, but it might not be. Either way, the voice actor does excellent portrayal of the character, and just gets the attitude that if the translation is very, very close to the original Japanese, then yeah, the character's attitude is spot on with his attitude towards everything, and his very kind of, what's the word? He has very vague answers to a lot of things. Sometimes he won't even really answer. He'll just kind of laugh like, and then leave you wondering what the hell is he talking about. That's how cool his character becomes within the storyline. Not to mention, he's probably the second most important character almost. If it wasn't for the fact that, well, Yuna and Tidus are probably the two most important characters for a number of reasons, one of which is the little Steki Dane song, interlude, whatever, that it's one of my favorite. I still get chills on my spine when I watch it, but that's not only because of the fact that it's Japanese singer, idol of sorts, I imagine, but it's the graphics. That's one of the things that really grabs you at this game. It becomes at the point where you're thinking, wow, this is deadly real at this point. Not to mention that we have voice actors, which attaches personality to the characters that wasn't there before. But continuing on, we have interesting system with the summons, where the summons actually come out. I mean, I always enjoyed that. I mean, this would definitely be up there, at least in my top 3, which means maybe Final Fantasy 7 might get pushed down. I mean, if we're using the common hypothetical situation, or let's just say I was kidnapped, thrown into a cell with food and all the amenities like that, but I was forced otherwise to be playing a single Final Fantasy game, or, only playing Final Fantasy games. If I had to choose out of a huge library they give me, but they say that's all you can play, and they give me memory cards and all those sorts of things, I would probably definitely have Final Fantasy X at the top of the list almost, because it's that good. Not to mention, I wouldn't really want to play Final Fantasy XI because, well, it wouldn't have the same appeal, because I'd be trapped in a room, and I wouldn't be able to go outside and actually socialize, which would kind of defeat the purpose of MMORPGs, because they're kind of social games like that. But yeah, Final Fantasy X is a game you can play over and over and do many different things, and that's principally because of the sphere grid system that's been designed, where you can customize the characters a lot. And there's always the thing at the end where you can essentially have every character go through the entire sphere grid, maxing out virtually all their stats that you can. It becomes a very fascinating way to go through the game. Not to mention there are challenges where you only go through a certain sphere grid, or you go through no sphere grid, which makes for possibly one of the more challenging games ever, I imagine, because not only does the sphere grid give you new abilities, it actually enables you to increase your stats. Now, perhaps that could be part of the playthrough where you actually increase your stats, but that would mean that you can actually go through every other part of the sphere grid. That's actually how they kind of design it. You can either go through the sphere grid solely increasing your stats, but not caring about the abilities to add a challenge, or you can just get abilities and not increase your stats and selectively use the abilities strategically and all that. Either way, I could probably go on for this for another 10 minutes. This game is fascinating. Not to mention that we have possibly one of the cooler bosses, as it were, even though it's not really the final boss. The final boss is a quite big spoiler involving Tidus. It's not Tidus, I'll tell you that much. It has a close relation to Tidus. But then we have the antagonist, as it were, who actually serves more as an antagonist for Yuna than he does for Tidus, because he is actually a summoner as well. And he has really, really cool hairstyle, to boot. He's probably one of my favorite villains as well, up there with Sephiroth and Kuja from 7 and 9, respectively. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one. This was one of my favorite rants. I'll probably enjoy Final Fantasy X2 as well. Anyway, next time, well, I already spoiled it. Anyway, see you later.